Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Privacy Culture's webinar, Is Your Privacy Program Good Enough? I'm Steve Wright, your host for today. I have got a fantastic lineup of guests with us. I'll introduce them in just 1 second. Data protection officers are under immense pressure, navigating between evolving regulations, growing consumer awareness, and ever-increasing data volumes. Ensuring a robust privacy program can feel like a constant uphill battle. The question then becomes, is your current approach sufficient enough? Are you simply ticking boxes, or are you fostering a genuine culture of privacy within your organization? Here today is a reality check for experienced DPOs to assess the effectiveness of their privacy program and to see how they measure up through benchmarking. I am delighted to introduce our guests today with you. Up my top right is Agnes Terreau from ManPowerGroup. Agnes is a DPO passionate about new technologies and ethics, currently serving at a global workforce solutions company. She was recognized as a finalist at the Picasso Privacy Awards last November for her significant contributions to promoting a culture of privacy. Welcome, Agnes.
Hello.
Also joining us is Sandeep Amar from MSCI. Sandeep is a seasoned compliance professional with extensive experience with data-centric regulatory requirements in the financial services and tech sectors. He is currently the Chief Privacy Officer for MSCI, where he was also responsible for third-party assurance, AI governance, and insider risk, as well as supporting compliance with data-centric regulatory requirements. Also joining us, fresh in, thank you, Helen, for managing to get connected, is Helen Allen from the London Stock Exchange Group. Helen is a seasoned privacy and data protection professional, adept at creating global privacy frameworks, embedding accountability, managing privacy risks, and building effective networks with stakeholders like works councils, regulatory authorities, and partners. Welcome, Helen.
Hello, I hope you can hear me okay. I am having a few issues. Oh, great. Okay.
Very pleased to see you.
Thank you.
And you're looking very brown, so you've obviously been on a nice holiday.
The white helps.
Very good. And finally, but not least, Jamie Hawkins from Pearson. Jamie has been a lot of things, including a door-to-door salesman and a naval officer. But for the last 15 or so years, he has helped multi-international enterprises create and scale their data protection programs. He's trying to work out how to add AI to the list of things. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello.
Right, well, ladies and gents, we are here to ask some challenging questions for our audience. And just for those who are tuning in, please feel free to write your questions, submit your questions, and then I'll do my best to ask this esteemed panel some of those questions towards the end. We've got up until the hour for our presentation today, so we will, without haste, go straight to the first question. And this question I'm going to put to you, Jamie, as you are a door-to-door salesman, which tickles me. Can DPOs move beyond mere GDPR compliance to build genuine trust with stakeholders?
Well, door-to-door sales, Steve, is actually a pretty good starting point for my answer to that question, because I think it's probably uncontroversial to say 9/10 of this is managing the relationships with stakeholders and bringing them with you on the journey. If I have a mantra, It's we are doing this with you, not to you. Certainly when you are sort of setting up a privacy program. Now that's at 30,000 feet. It's not terribly helpful necessarily to the audience. So if I break that down a bit further, what I feel a good privacy program should do is it needs to provide the folks at the coalface with clear information on where they are at on their journey from a data protection perspective, what the next steps for them ought to be, bearing in mind the constantly changing landscape that we're all addressing. But that's your internal stakeholders. It also needs to deliver the artifacts, the things which you want to put in the hands of our customers so they feel that they are in control of the information with which we are safeguarded. And that can be anything from a clear and comprehensible privacy notice to the wording of a cookie banner, the consent statements that we provide via just-in-time notices. All of those things make up that picture, but it is fundamentally about trust, internally and externally, and ensuring that those stakeholders, because they all agree that these things are important, understand what it means for them in practice. Because although this group, I suspect, is very happy to geek out on, for instance, the requirements of Article 28 of the GDPR, most normal humans aren't.
Well, I don't know where that places us humans. But thank you. Agnes, thoughts, any builds on that?
Yes, also I think also that also data protection compliance also is more than only legal stuff or process. It's also managing people relationship. And I think it's also important the mindset that you want to have as a DPO. Are you understanding your role as a facilitator or as a checkbox ticker? And I think it's really important to have the presence, to be near to the business, to understand the needs, so you can also really bring added value to the job and to the business. So I think it's really also a mindset mindset matter.
Yeah, no, thank you. Helen?
I think both Jamie and Agnes have said it very, very well. And of course, you cannot really beat the drum of the stakeholder management enough, because it is very important. They will back your framework, they will back your program, they will support it and make it what it is. And let's face it, we all are with a little basket asking for budget all the time. So your key stakeholders are very important to help you with that, so they can help your framework. The only thing that I would add actually to what Jamie and Agnes have said from my perspective is also listening to the individuals as well. So if there is a complaints management process, for example, listen to not only those that have been categorized as personal data complaints, but have a look overall at complaints and see what people are not getting. Jamie was spot on with, the fact that, yes, we might be able to have a look at the actual detail and drill down and tell people, but most individuals out on the street, the people that get the number 78 bus, will not be. So we need to be very clear. Let's forget that legalese language and let's put it very straight to the point and be transparent. And I think that is something that will definitely build trust. And one more last thing from me before I pass to Sandeep. Just do what you say. It is, I know we all do. That's why we are all there, okay, to say that, to do exactly what we say on the privacy notice. Make sure that you actually do indeed do what you're saying, because if something comes up and hits the news, or one bad term hits the internet, that's it. Your trust is gone. So make sure you know what you're doing and you're doing what you're saying. So over to you back, Steve, now.
Yeah, no, Sandeep, quite rich answers there. So, but anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there's a lot obviously that's already been said, but I think the key thing for me would be understanding, your stakeholders' strategy, understanding their objectives, and demonstrating how the privacy program objectives can actually support their strategy. It can ultimately be an enabler. I think I've seen so many examples of that in practice in many different organizations, and making sure that stakeholders understand that is key to building that relationship and actually being able to take things forward.
That's really strong point. I absolutely endorse that. Thank you for that, Sandy. So actually, I mean that my next question actually comes to you. So I didn't plan this very well, did I? What are the key indicators and metrics that show this privacy program is fostering trust, as we talked about, rather than this tick box regulatory exercise that we all scuppered for back in early 2016-17,
Sure, yeah.
getting ready for 2018.
Yeah, and I guess those kind of core metrics are going to be those operational metrics, very much quantitative focused on those kind of operational privacy requirements. I think moving it towards more of a qualitative approach is something that we can do for kind of moving away from for example the number of incidents, the number of DSARs, how long it takes you to resolve these kind of things. For me, there isn't a lot of value in doing that once your privacy program matures. I think it's more about ensuring that you've actually implemented privacy, you've embedded privacy into core processes. So that's the thing that I would be looking to actually evaluate and to measure. So it's have you actually truly implemented privacy by design? So when your stakeholders actually seek your input as a partner that's contributing to their strategic goals. So it kind of ties in, with the previous point that I made. But with regards to metrics, I think for me it's about measuring the progress and focusing on control maturity. So I guess for me, I really like frameworks. I think the NIST privacy framework adds a lot of value, and maybe when you overlay that with something like CMM, you can actually track scores, you can track maturity, and you can see how your program is actually progressing. And that's also something that your board and your management team are going to be interested as well. Everyone's ultimately accountable, and we can demonstrate how privacy is actually delivering to those strategic objectives.
I like it. So linking to those strategic goals and having a control framework. Yeah, totally agree. Agnes.
I think a good metrics is when you see that you get more requests from the business side, or when you are involved.
Demand goes up.
Or when you are involved in a meeting, from the beginning, when they want to implement a new tool.
Right.
You can say, okay, that's a lot of progress. I'm involved from the beginning, and I think that's really important, really. And maybe it's not always measurable, this maturity. So it's not really we have so much DSARs or whatever, but yes, it's like you feel this as you feel this as a DPO. And I think also what's important, it's when you get questions, when people are asking, I'm not sure if it's a breach or not, what do you think? When you also get feedback, response, or likes to the communication you are doing, that's also metrics you see it's improving, the awareness is improving. And when people are not scared to report a data breach or to report incidents, or when they are not sure about this.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Agnes. What about you, Jamie? What are you doing? What are the key metrics for you down there.
It's sorely tempting to say it's what Sandeep and Agnes just said, but but just riffing on what they both just said, and actually it was said in answer to the last question as well. Complaints are an act of kindness. If you understand both the things that people are complaining about and the positive feedback, it is an incredibly helpful indicator of where there is either room for improvement or where we need to be doing more of something. And one thing that I've started doing much more is the DPO plays a role in the sales process, either by providing the compliance professionals on the customer side with the comfort they need, that what they're engaging with and what they are buying is something that they feel comfortable standing behind, but also attending meetings with sales folks in order to explain how products work. And these, Sandeep said it, these principles are product design principles as much as privacy ones. And if that can be lived with customers in words they understand, you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think all your points so far, that definitely attending the sales meetings, I think is really good. Before I ask you, Helen, your thoughts, one of the things we had to do at John Lewis when I was CPO there was spend a certain amount of days on shop floor. Talking of salespeople, I was put in the TV sales department. I didn't sell anything, Jamie. I don't know what. but the other times I was at Waitrose, dealing with customer complaints or stacking shelves. So they encouraged all management to go back to the shop floor to understand the business, which was to Sandeep's point earlier. And I think that's really, really important. What is it that we do as a business? And how does that demonstrate value? How do I and my team and what we're doing here actually add value, build that trust? So I really like that. I love the examples that you've given so far. Thank you. Just any further thoughts, Helen, on KPIs?
Well, no, I mean, all of them is very, very good. But can I just say that sometimes, let's not forget that they do have, those classic matrices do have still a space in the reporting. So, for example, if you want to manage resources and you having an influx of DSAs and you wanted to, to demonstrate that you need extra people, or if budget discussions come into it. So please don't stop reporting on those. I totally agree with the controls. I think the controls are there.
Yeah.
They really need to be, and also risks. And you can actually assess the maturity about how many risks have been raised and how the risks are managed. So if there is a tie, then that can help as well.
Really good. Yeah, absolutely. We forgot the classic risk. The amount of DPOs and CPOs I work with, and I say, "How are you managing your risks?"
Yeah,
and they give me that look. Say, "Well,
yes,
but we're doing all of this." It's about how. How are you being effective? Okay, that's fantastic. Brilliant start, and we're only sort of 20 minutes in. So this question really for you, Agnes, is about sort of some of the main. I'm switching it now. Okay, so we've established some pretty good baselines here. If our audience wasn't taking notes, then run for a piece of paper now, because this is great material. What are the main challenges in shifting from this kind of reactive mindset? I've got to put the fire out. Respond to this DSAR, tomorrow, sort of thing. Especially when there's been a complaint to the chief exec, and then moving to that proactive privacy approach, and how does our audience do that? How do we go from this, I'm running around like a headless chicken, responding to this, looking at this contract, etc., dealing with this third party AI. How do you get into that proactive Zen-like status where we're just ready for it? I felt like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix then.
Also it's a cultural challenge, and you need, as a DPO, you need to have a procedure for this. For example, you need also to make the accountability clear. Also, you are not the one that is accountable and that is doing everything. Also, you are supporting, you are advising, but you need to have clear owners, also risk owners or business owners, and also from the technical, from the application point of view, you need to have an application owner. And the business owner and the asset owner work together, and the DPO supports them. So you need to have really clear responsibilities, and also clear procedures, because you need to be involved. So you need to know a lot, what is happening in the company, what are the new the strategies, the new tools we want to implement, the new process, and you really need to have a process that is clear. Also, when a new tool needs to be implemented, the business process owner needs to start the process. He needs to involve the DPO. He needs to involve information security. He needs to involve procurement and all these stakeholders. And I think that's really important to have a clear accountability and a clear process also.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Sandeep, thoughts on this?
Sorry, just take myself off mute again. I think, some of it has already been said around changing mindsets. I think that's probably a key one for me. But focusing on that kind of control improvement, that process maturity, is something that you actually need to change mindsets on. So you need to take yourself out of that firefighting mindset, that firefighting approach, and actually, when you're actually seeing those issues occur, you need to look at control effectiveness and control improvement, so things aren't repeated. I mean, some of this, I suppose, I kind of go back to kind of IT 101. You go back to root cause analysis. You try and improve the process. You focus on that continuous improvement, so that you can take a kind of step out of that firefighting mindset. And in order to measure how effective your controls are, I think we're kind of back to the initial questions on looking at those kind of metrics. Ultimately looking at implementing a framework and process maturity. So I think there's a lot of overlay and interconnection with these points.
Yeah, no, I do like that, and I think firefighting mode is actually quite addictive. It gives you a bit of adrenaline, and you feel like you're a bit of a superhero, turning up to save the day. So it's very tempting.
Kind of saving the day every day.
Exactly, it's very tempting to get into that kind of routine. In fact, I've seen that very much in not so much in DPO space, but more so in CISO space, where they're just there for people who are responding and just there to save the day, and sort of like a sheriff walking into town. So Jamie, any thoughts on that? So then I'll move on to our next question.
I think the high points have been covered. I mean, the good governance is key, and from the stakeholder management perspective, it's worth reiterating that good governance speeds the business up. It doesn't slow it down. So in as much as the governance will enable us to give back the work, Agnes, if I can borrow some of what you were saying a moment ago, it's the business that's accountable for these things, with us acting as a center of excellence, supportive guidance, providing support and guidance. But in as much as we set the rules, we should also set, it is quite possible to say to the business, from a product design perspective, you can play from the rivers over here to the valleys over here, You need to let us know that you're doing it so that we can audit you, but you don't need our approval. Crack on. These are the things that you can do. And if you do these things in these ways, full steam ahead, folks. And it's remarkable how that drives engagement and speed in a way that sometimes few other things can.
That's better. Okay, thank you. So, Helen, I wanted to pick up on your question about risk as you brought it into this conversation, which is a subject dear to my heart. So, how does continuous monitoring and regular risk assessment contribute to that proactive privacy strategy, and how can that effectiveness be measured or benchmarked? So sort of two questions there, sorry.
Yeah, you're being a bit cheeky, aren't you, Steve?
As usual.
So I think that is the same question a lot of people do ask. And you said when you introduced me, you said I'm a seasoned data protection officer, and I really am. And so I've asked those questions a number of times throughout my career. How do I? Is doing a DPIA and seeing the results from that enough? Do I tie it with the general risk management process? Do I not tie it with a general risk management process? These are all the questions that all of us have to go through every time just to try to assess. I don't think, and I will borrow something that Sandeep said, I don't think there is one solution that will solve anyone's problem. You need to look at the objectives of your organization. You need to look which way the organization is going and how the risk appetite actually survive. How is it built? What is the approach to risk by the whole organization? And then transfer that onto your own data protection assessments and highlight that risk. What I do suggest, though, is the risk has a phenomenal effect on accountability. What I have found over the years is you get people to raise the risk, you get an owner, and then you take the advise approach, the advisor approach. Then people start being interested in privacy. They start owning that risk and they start reporting on it, and also start to build in the accountability factor and the maturity of your program as well. So the controls and the risk assessments, they need to be really tied back to your matrices, and that's why I'm saying sometimes the old-fashioned matrices, they're not to be forgotten, because they can be really, really helpful in many, many ways. What was your second question?
Well,
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It was a long question. It was a really long question. I'm sorry. It was about the effectiveness of monitoring and benchmarking. Is that an approach, a strategy that you would employ yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
It definitely is. And it's not only that, and something that Jamie said, and something that we've been trying to, I have tried in many organizations to embed. And this is the privacy by design part, and then the monitoring after. So basically give the people what they need to follow, a pattern, a checklist, whatever you want to call it, and say, follow these rules. It's not even rules. If you are setting up a website, you need a banner, you need a privacy notice, some certain things that need to be standardized. If you do all these things, then you don't need to come through the governance process. You have my like, but I'm not just, okay, I've got to place a certain level of trust. Okay, not everybody's out there to get me as a DPO, but I have to go back and ensure that everything that's going through that process, in fact, does follow. Now, I cannot do the whole thing. I cannot assess all of them. So it's a sample that obviously you assess, and it is an amnesty-based sort of approach. that happens. So that is the risk-based approach. Now, the other, of course, the monitoring is about the issues that they're self-reported. So we do, especially at my current location, we do have a very healthy attitude to raising the risk, being aware of it and managing it. So that is excellent news. So maybe I'm luckier than most, but we have a very close relationship with the risk managers, and every risk that is issued, raised together with the business in regards to privacy, we get attached to it. So we get notified straight away. We manage it together with the business and hand in hand, advising them, saying to them, okay, I have seen in my lifetime, I have to say, I have seen some risks saying, well, actually, that's not quite a risk. I think you're overdoing it a little bit. I know it's strange to hear, but there are those opportunities amongst that. There are some people that can be a little bit too eager, I would say, to manage the risk.
Yep.
So I let
Thank
my
you,
colleagues.
Yeah, Jamie, how are you measuring risk and monitoring that? What would you endorse? What approach?
So I'm going to borrow a little what Sandeep said earlier. When it comes to measuring, ultimately, what you don't measure, you can't manage, at least in my book. So when you are measuring things, it has to be by reference to something that your board and internal as well as external stakeholders can understand, whether that's the NIST framework, the ICO's accountability framework, CMMI. There are some out there to choose, and indeed, some of the folks on this call played a part in suggesting an approach to privacy risk assessment as part of Picasso last year. Just shout out there.
Yes.
But for example, the NIST framework and being able to articulate where one sits against the controls that are outlined in that framework and the steps that need to be taken in order to address any areas for improvement is an extremely helpful way, I find, of measuring oneself against a framework that isn't just privacy according to me, which frankly isn't that helpful when a board member needs to understand it in a wider context.
Yes. No, thank you, Jamie. Agnes, what do you think? How are you measuring all of this good stuff that's going on?
But I think, yes, as I think a good point that Jamie mentioned is you need to have first the basis to measure a risk. You need to have the policies and the governance and the guidelines. And then it's, for example, important to when you have the ROPAS, when you do the ROPAS as a business do the ROPAS, you automatically measure the risk of this ROPA, and you are really at the beginning, and you can also make the owner accountable, and you can measure and follow and the risk. The risk mitigation of the risk, or if they want to accept this. And sometimes, although I had some reaction, I don't need this tool, or why are we doing this? I didn't know that it could have this risk. We don't need this risk at all. We had some such reactions. So it was also good to that the owner could reflect what they are doing.
Yeah. No, thank you, Agnes. Sandeep, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how to understand your data flows, what methods can be used, and you kind of alluded to it with the risk stuff that you said and the control framework, about control improvement and control effectiveness, which is music to my ears. More actually, and before you answer that question, more of an observation. Would you say, and maybe this is for the panel, for those of us who've worked in a sort of financial services backdrop, where controls and control effectiveness and measurement, SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, and all of that came out of Enron, those giddy days in the early noughties. They're very familiar to me. But for some of our listeners, that they might not have that same regime. But what's your thoughts, just collectively? Sorry, and then I'll go back to the question, Sandeep. Anyone thoughts on that, about different regulatory pressures or different industry sectors that some of our listeners will be scratching their head, going, control framework, or not worked maybe in financial services or banking? What's your thoughts?
I think ultimately there are going to be different models in different industry verticals.
Right.
I mean, I've worked in financial services, I've worked in tech, I've worked in consultancy, and through consultancy I had a lot of exposure to many different organizations, including Enron, I might add. And as part of that, there are ultimately models that operate within those industries. So I don't think financial services is necessarily unique in having those control frameworks. I think it's more that there is obviously an awful lot more scrutiny. A lot of this has come kind of off the back of incidents, obviously, kind of various crashes and things like that, that there is more scrutiny and more red tape to implement. So I think, different sectors are going to have comparable models, I would say.
Yeah. And Jamie, what just thoughts on that, on different sectors? Because you're in education, Pearson's. You've obviously come from command and control, being in the Navy, commanding ships, etc. So you're used to that. But what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's very tempting to give a loyally, it depends. The cold hard reality is that most of the individuals who are at the coalface delivering the products and services that our organizations create are not outside the financial services sector or a very restricted, regimented environment like the military, going to be intimately familiar with the requirements of Sarbanes-Oxley or other well understood control frameworks. So this is where we get to play our role in mapping those frameworks to our own programs to help the business understand its risks. Sandeep said it brilliantly when he talked about controls earlier. This is on us. I don't think there can be an expectation that the whole, each individual of each organization that we serve has a really detailed understanding of these very sector-specific frameworks. It's just not likely. That then throws up a challenge, which is, how do you then map those risks against the data processing activities that are taking place? And the thought that I would leave everybody with on this front is, if our programs are relying on human beings to validate data provided by other human beings, to then map that against our programs and the relevant frameworks, whether it's SOX or other control frameworks, then we are leaving ourselves exposed, simply because as humans, we all make mistakes. And increasingly, and I know this is perhaps jumping ahead to some of the other questions you've got coming, Steve, but I think the approach to this is to leverage technology to ensure that that is doing the hard work from a data mapping perspective, and then the humans can provide that extra layer of insight to overlay what in many cases is going to be an extremely complex web of controls, because they differ by jurisdiction. And I think all of us are serving organizations which have got various jurisdictional issues to contend with.
No, this is brilliant. And, we're here today to talk about, the very essence of, is your privacy program good enough? And we've touched on some really good things so far. We've talked about the risks. We've talked about different KPIs. We've talked about control frameworks. We talked about measuring, governance, root cause analysis, clear accountability and responsibility. So this is absolutely heading in the right direction. So I'm very pleased about that for a start. I just wanted to sort of change the tack slightly to start talking about one thing that we haven't spoken about yet, which is the human factor. And you're sort of alluding to it, Jamie. So you set me up nicely without any collaboration. Isn't that amazing?
You didn't pay me, I promise.
The human factor, the people part of process technology that we've all grown up with, control frameworks, effectiveness of those controls, measuring risk mitigation, getting us reducing the material level of risk facing our organizations. They're all things we've steeped in from the early noughties and even before that with various different frameworks, such as the ISO standards and British standards prior to that. But what about the people? Because the human factor is the bit that which I think is one of the hardest things about converting, because you can lead a horse to water. You can't necessarily get it to drink the water, right? So I wanted to ask you, Helen, let's start with you. I just wanted just bring us down into this subject. What strategies have you implemented to facilitate, first of all, that cross-departmental, we all have functions, HR, marketing, sales, operations, etc. How have you done that in terms of cross-departmental collaboration on privacy issues? And what does good look like for you in that space? And then I'll drill into some of the more privacy awareness on the back of that. I'll come to you, Agnes, after Helen, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's an extremely good question. Of course, right behind you, you do have that privacy culture sign, and I'm afraid it is all down to privacy culture, isn't it? Now, it all depends whether your program is federated or not, whether you got the first line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense or not. So there are different approaches, but it all depends what your organization, what risk management the organization relies on. Now, from the human factor is always going to be the most challenging, and not only because you constantly need to, the awareness, the training, you're going to come into it, so I'm not going to touch on it very much, but also because people they move departments. So I'll give you an example. The ROPAs, and I don't know if you have, if you guys are actually having the same issues, but people want to, move jobs. So even with the same organization, and suddenly the ROPA is the last thing on their mind of updating that I'm not the process owner anymore. I've gone on and I have gone. So that is only a simple example.
Good example.
And what do you do? What do you do? You need to start considering about the levers and joiners and movers process, and how do you tie that in with your framework so you can update your ROPAs potentially. So there are all your levers, again, the movers requirements from your managers when they're moving people around. What do? Maybe that is another thing that you can do. So those are challenges that you find in everyday life. And of course, again, people are leaving and they're taking away with them a lot of knowledge and a lot of process knowledge, and it doesn't get handed down. So very clear instructions on process, very minimal process instructions, I should say, and I'm really saying minimal. Don't produce those huge process maps that nobody can follow, and even you can sometimes get confused about. So that people can they start a job, they can start actually doing a job with privacy in mind, so they can understand.
Yeah.
I really want to say about training. So will you forgive me?
Hold your fire.
Horses. Okay,
we're coming. We'll come back to you. Okay. I want to hear from Agnes and Sandeep, and then we'll loop back.
Okay.
I think, for example, on about two solutions. When you have a process, for example, when you want to implement new process or change process or new tool, and you have a governance process. And the defined owner needs to involve every stakeholders. He's learning about communicating with other departments. So that's a first point. Another solution I think that can work is when you also make your management responsible. So, for example, for the ROPAs, you have the owner of the ROPAs, the business owner, but you can also assign this ROPA to the senior leader of the department, and it makes more. It put more pressure, more accountability on this. Also, for example, you have a ROPA in HR, you have a HR business partner that is the owner of the ROPA, and you have on top the division manager of HR, which is also responsible for this ROPA. So not the doing, but he knows, okay, I have this ROPA, and if someone is leaving, I need to assign another business process owner, and it's not the DPO who is running and seeking for an owner. So I think that can also be a solution.
That's
make this cross-functional understanding.
Yes. Sorry, Agnes. So what you're talking about is this accountability from the top down and the roles and responsibilities. What Helen was speaking about is this joiners, movers, leavers, and this constant transition, especially when, at John Lewis, we had 85,000 staff. So we had 200 champions to begin with. And then 2 years later, the same 200 champions are not there anymore. They've moved roles or they've left, etc. So it's this constant uptick of communication. Yes. Sandeep, what's your thoughts on this then? Because this cross-departmental collaboration, it sounds brilliant on the tin, but in reality, it's flipping hard work.
It's definitely hard work. I mean, I think to build on, Agnes and Helen's point, we have to have that accountability. We're definitely going to be dealing with that change. But, I think, ultimately, your business stakeholders will need to understand that we're not doing privacy for kicks. As much as, the point's already been made about us all being privacy geeks. The key piece is that the business requirements dictate the data that's being processed. Technology are supporting that, and we're supporting the compliance around it. That's kind of the key thing here. So it's their data, it's their business process. We are supporting them in remaining compliant. So it's ensuring that they understand that and understand the value that we're adding to make sure that they remain compliant. And one thing that I've actually seen some value in is actually, in terms of those records of processing, when you actually have, a privacy steward, a business process owner, call it what you want, actually leave the organization or move on. In terms of finding who that replacement is going to be, rather than trying to move down, I always move up a layer. So I'm going to go to their former boss, to the chief HR officer, for example, and say, right, that's what it is. And it's up to them to delegate who that's going to be. I'm not going to do the legwork in saying who that should be. I can always make a recommendation as to who I think has some of that, that tacit knowledge. But the explicit knowledge we've already got in our records of processing. So no one can claim ignorance. We can say, right, well, here's the ROPA. We will help you get up to speed. This is what we understand. Does that tally with your understanding? And then, they've got it from there, obviously, with our support.
Yeah, and I really like where you're going with this, because all of you, we are talking about that responsibility, that up and down the food chain. When I was at John Lewis, we had 85,000 staff. 400 shots. Fortunately, not a huge amount of rotation of staff. It's quite a loyal staff base, but we did have seasonal workers. And so, Jamie, I want to know, across the Pearson's empire, you're in many countries, you've got a big remit. How are you, what methods then are you recommending to our listeners in terms of effective engagement with employees, in terms of awareness, communications and training? How are you doing that?
A couple of different ways, which should come as no surprise from the world's learning business. But at the pointy end, everybody has to take mandatory training before they get access to any of our systems, and we track that, we measure that, and it's very easy to follow up with folks who don't take their training and remove their access if it isn't renewed in time. But that's not terribly effective. That gets you your tick in the box to go back to what we were talking about at the start of this conversation. Training is far more effective when it is role specific, it's brief, it's targeted at things that are going to make a difference to that individual's day job, rather than being, do you know what the 7 principles in the UK GDPR are? Not helpful.
Is that not the normal training?
It is not the normal training. So people understand what is it that matters most to them in the context of the job that they are doing. It has to be bite-sized, and then when you come back around to make sure that people are remaining current, you drip feed the training on top of the sort of basic mandatory stuff, and then you test that knowledge. But it is more effective to do that briefly than to make somebody suffer through a 2-hour training course once a year where they grit their teeth and do the sort of metaphorical equivalent of sticking their fingers in their ears and getting through it as quickly as they possibly can, and walk away thinking, thank God I don't have to do that for another 12 months.
Yes, we've all been there, right? No, that's great. Thank you. So I just want to, now we're in the last 8 minutes. So I'm going to kind of just touch on technology, and then I'm going to ask each of you to come round with your 3 top tips for our audience on how to build and test that your privacy program is good enough. Okay. So this technology question, I'll start with you, Sandeep. What privacy technology solutions have you adopted to manage your data more efficiently? And how do you evaluate their impact on your privacy program success?
Right. Okay. So I've got a couple of examples. So from various organizations that I've worked with. So I suppose, a lot of these are kind of labeled privacy enhancing technologies. I think that's a great marketing spin, if I'm brutally honest. I think pseudonymization of data, tokenization of data, we've been doing that well before GDPR, particularly kind of, PCI DSS requirements and things of that nature. So I would say that is a very, very, very good example. And it's one that has flowed through to any sensitive data set. I've seen it being used in healthcare, in medical trials, obviously in the privacy space. So that is probably a big one for me. Another one would be leveraging technology for, to prevent data exposures. So, mitigating the impact of human errors by providing real-time warning and coaching opportunities to users. Are you sure you want to do this? This doesn't look quite right. And there are many ways that you can actually do that. Machine learning and AI now being much more prevalent and acceptable, those are good ways you can achieve those kind of things.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Agnes, have you got any thoughts on that? Pets, which, as Sandeep said, is a little bit of a spin. Pets enhancing solutions, but thoughts on that? In particular, if it has an impact on your privacy program to help you move it up the maturity mark.
As I think it's hardly possible now to work only with Excel files or so for supporting a privacy management program. You need a technology for this. It's important that this technology has also a workflow so that you can have an interaction with the recipient of the task. You can always follow the status of the request. And it's also important that it is that this technology has also module with interface. So when you have, for example, when you create a WOPA, you have the view on the processing activity, you have the view on the technology, the application, and you have the combination with the vendor. And you have really a good view of all the information about this. And you can have this, it's auditable, such a technology, and that's good.
Yeah, the audibility is really crucial.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I like that. Listen, we have run out of time, so I'm going to ask you, each of you, to come up now with your top tips. And the top tips are sort of, really, what would you recommend to people listening today in terms of, is your privacy good enough? And then kind of what could you do to benchmark that, or what recommendations would you give? I'll start with Helen, if I may, and then sort of work my way and end on Agnes again.
Okay, so the very first one, and I wanted to talk about training anyway. So training is not just the once a year, as Jamie said, and training does not necessarily have to be organized. Grab your opportunity at any time, whether you're talking to the boardroom or you're talking to the post room. If you need, go back to the basics, and sometimes we forget back to the basics. So number 2 tip is the basics.
Okay.
Sometimes actually going back to who is the controller and who is the processor can help you a long way. And number 3, try your best to try and automate as much as you can. So by automate, I'm not necessarily suggesting technology, because technology will always come with a price tag. So it can always be, as I said earlier on, a privacy pattern or a checklist or something that you give to people to enable them to do their job in a compliant way and embedding privacy at the same time. So that's my 3 top tips.
I love it. And that could be frequently asked questions, giving them a list of, super. Okay,
exactly.
Sandeep?
I'm going to actually echo a point that Jamie mentioned. You need to measure it to manage it. I think that is something that I've kind of been focused on throughout my career. I'm sure Jamie's been doing that in the Navy for a while as well. It's the bread and butter. And then I would say, if you're measuring it, obviously there are many frameworks available. You don't even need to use a framework to actually, see how effective your program is. But I think you need to set targets. You need to establish what does good actually look like for your organization. And that's how you can, progress. And it's how you're going to get your budget. It's how you're going to build your team. It's how you're going to demonstrate value.
Really good. Thank you. Jamie?
I'll be very brief. Know your people internally. Without having those stakeholders on board, this won't work. Know your products. It isn't sufficient for us to know the law. We have to understand the products that our businesses are delivering, as well as the teams who are selling them and building them. And finally, know your customers. This is ultimately not about black letter law. It is about delivering real world impact for individuals. And if we lose sight of that, then the best lawyers in the world aren't going to help us.
Oh, love it. Love it. Agnes, the pleasure is all yours. The last closing 30 seconds.
I would say be present. That's really important. Understand the needs of your business. keep it simple. That's really important.
Yes.
Make awareness and information tailored. Be always present. So that's really the key, I think.
Wonderful. Listen, ladies and gents, members of the audience, thank you very, very much for listening today. I'm Steve Wright, your host for today from Privacy Culture. Is your privacy program good enough? You've listened to our superb audience today. Agnes Terreau from ManPowerGroup, Jamie Hawkins from Pearson, Helen Allen from London Stock Exchange, and Sandeep Amar from MSCI. Thank you so much. Please, can you follow the link through to the feedback forms? We do need your feedbacks. We need to know what else you want us to talk about, what else you want us to cover off. We've got lots of things happening. And finally, it would be remiss of me not to mention Picasso. Don't forget, please, we're a sponsor of Picasso. Your nominations are now open till the 9th of August. So you've been given that stay of execution. So get your nominations in there. Best team, best product, best company, all of those kind of good things. There are 17 categories to choose from, and the process doesn't take too long to submit a nomination. We've had loads of nominations, but we want more, so we can find the best of the best. And then 400 or 500 of us get together on the 12th of November at the Marriott in Mayfair this November. So very, very exciting stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to my esteemed guests. It's been wonderful to have you, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.